Hi, Dad.
I,
We've been chatting for 10 minutes. We've both been adjusting our backgrounds. I think we look good. I think we look good.
you do.
I look pale as a ghost. I also look like I'm about to pop. I can sense the swollenness in my face, but I'm excited to talk to you today.
Me
We didn't
too. Me
we didn't
too.
we didn't
We
know if we were
put,
gonna do this before a baby.
we put it together pretty fast.
Yeah, we did. But I really want to get this done. You'll be my last interview before I have a new baby. Are you honored with that title?
Let's hope it's not in the next hour.
I don't think I'm gonna have a baby within the next hour. I think you and I would both know if that was the case. But no, I obviously we have things from coaching, talking about the three of us, your daughters, and also umpiring and reffing a little bit, and then maybe some parenting advice that I am actually looking for, selfishly. But that's kind of the agenda today, and we'll kind of just see where it takes us.
Sounds
You,
good.
you down? All right, let's do it. First of all, I know we mentioned this in the last interview, but you played collegiate basketball and you coached basketball. And to be completely honest, from as one of your players, I think from my point of view, you enjoyed coaching basketball in a way to where I'm not saying I didn't see it in softball, but the amount of love that you had for the final minute of a game in basketball, and you're writing up plays, and maybe we're down by two, and you're trying to help us like figure out a way to win. I feel like that was some of your favorite moments of coaching. Am I wrong?
Well, no, I would have rather been up 15 with the last 2 minutes of every game
True.
than ever being down. No, it was good. It's always good to get the adrenaline rolling. And you know, I didn't plan games so they would be close at the end. Uh, but I guess just growing up playing and then getting into parenting and then coaching from that it I guess I was prepared for it to a certain degree. I mean, again, we're not talking about the men's Final Four championship was yesterday, so it wasn't like that kind of pressure, but you want to see what you've prepared the players for to see how they can perform. So yeah, that was always exciting.
Yeah, and what I think I loved most now looking back on it is that you did a great job of seeing each individual player and having us play to whatever our strengths are. Like I never played post and never could, even though I got tall. But like, I'm thinking of Caitlin, I'm thinking of Becca. Like, you knew how to utilize different players and different skill sets and have them kind of shine in a way. How do you think you got that out of them or us, I guess, on the court?
Well, I guess I'm on the page that you can't coach every player the same way. Not being college, not being professional, you don't get to necessarily pick your players. So if you want to run a particular type of offense or a particular type of defense in basketball, and yeah, somewhat the same in softball, but slightly different, um, you can't unless you magically have that type of player show up at tryouts or those types of players show up at tryouts. So the challenge was always to see um, what you have when the season starts, and then you try to cover as much as you can. I mean, this again, this is not a full time job where you can practice you know 5 days a week, 4 days a week. Heck, sometimes we would only practice 1 or 2 days a week. So it's what can you get done in that period of time. That was always a challenge. So I mean, when you asked that first question about what my favorite part was, my favorite part, it turns out, ended up being practice planning.
Mm.
So the night before, sometimes the day of, at lunchtime or after work and before practice is when I would put put my game plan together or my practice plan together and or finalize it or tweak it or have something change my mind and I needed to switch some things around. Those were the those were the things for me that I really I wanted to do well. I don't know, right. I don't know if perfect, well, not perfect, but those were the things that I had some method to my madness. Again, it wasn't like an overall plan that I would, start in the beginning of the season and decide. I never I never was that partly never that prepared, but also I didn't want to put myself into a lane that couldn't adjust. So I was more of a, read and react and then prepare for the next thing based off of what I prepared and what I saw with the teams. Um, uh, maybe the night before the game or the week before, or hey, we're doing this, but we haven't even started looking at this aspect of the game. Again, it's also important to level set again. This was kids that were just learning a particular sport, maybe learning, trying to get to a next step in the, in the building process and taking all that into consideration for what we tried to do. Um, so and it was like that with softball too, but there was a different um, there were different goals, especially when I started coaching the travel, not just the rec ball. And I only did rec ball, I think 2 years, 3 years. But when we got into travel, and now again, there was a learning process for myself, but there was also, I don't want to just win games. In fact, I know I had to say this in the first time we talked, but I didn't care if we really won games. I cared that we competed. I cared that particular players got to play the positions that partly they wanted to, but also to where we, the parents, the players, and myself and the other coaches would think that they would have their best opportunity in college to play. So, there was a different preparation process. On top of that, we were so scattered, we really didn't have much practice opportunities later on with
Yeah.
our first teams. With your first team, we were mostly local for most of that time, so we could do things a little bit, um, I guess, more ground up building. But later on, we had players from all over the country playing for us, or at least
Midwest.
one half of the country.
Yeah.
So, you were just relying on them to show up and and just try to tweak what you saw with them.
Well, I know coaches who are listening are now wondering, especially maybe a new coach in whatever sport, we can say softball here. Um, what were you prioritizing? Because you said, the athletes are kind of new to it. We have some coaches here who are brand new to the game. We have some coaches here who are experienced. Maybe we can kind of split it into two and saying, okay, if you're working with a newer team, what are you prioritizing in practice? And then an older team, what are you prioritizing? Again, we can talk elite travel or we can kind of work in the middle and say, okay, if you have like 2 days a week, are you prioritizing um, reps or are you prioritizing situations? Does that depend on the type of season? We can go into so many different alleys, but let's start with just the youth coach. What are you prioritizing in your practices when you get to work with these players?
Well, in order to prepare players, you have to prepare yourself. And the only way I knew to do that was to draw from my experiences playing with some of the coaches that I wanted to pick things out of. And then there was the coaches that I wanted to make sure I wasn't going to replicate some of those things that either didn't have that great of value or were just presented in a way that made it either difficult to comprehend or the opposite. You give so little instruction that the kids would just have to figure it out on themselves. So it's how much instruction do you want to give versus how much basic um, here's the drill. Here are the things that could happen. Start the drill, then take time to build them up from wherever they're at. I mean, if I do something and let's say it's at level 2 out of 20, and they all pick it up really easy, then I'm like, well, okay, let's not worry about that. Maybe you guys are ready for level 5. Now, I didn't have levels written out, but I think you know what I mean,
Hmm.
where you just start with some super basic things and then build on them and see where everybody is, and then you can speed it up, you can slow it down, you can see who might be struggling with it, and then another challenge is how do you keep all the players, which may be at different levels for whatever that reason is. They just matured faster, they had more comprehension because they watched a lot, or they watched parents or older siblings, to the ones that really just saw it, maybe just watched it on TV and said, hey, I want to go do that, and try to provide the team activities, but more as an individual um, development standpoint. So and that was a struggle. I shouldn't say a struggle, what's the right word, a challenge. You know, maybe not so much with softball, with other team sports where you're passing and cutting, and you have to have spacing and all of that stuff, in like a soccer or even a volleyball or a basketball, of which I only know anything about basketball. Um, to help bring them along, to help them learn how to put forth effort, to then feel good about what they've done, and to not just gloss over it because uh, there will always be the kids that aren't great practice players. They don't like practicing. They just want to play.
Hmm.
So they just think it's a necessary evil that they have to do, as opposed to the kid that says, "Okay, really want to pick up everything. I have trouble with fielding a backhanded ground ball. So how do I work on that?" So again, there's 2,000 things you could practice on, and you just have to figure out which ones you want to start with, and then again let them go for it. And then spending more time with them in games and also in practice, you can see where they would where you'd want to go next. Um, yeah, I mean that's kind of where it is. But back to the first point that I was making, I didn't know how I wanted to coach originally. I mean, other than reflecting my personality. My personality is not to, you know, scream at people. My personality is not to, say, I'm going to tell you this once, and if you don't get it, we're going to run laps. Those that, but you also don't want to talk endlessly. And that was the thing that I had to struggle, or that I had to learn to not do, because I could talk for 2 hours and realize that, oh, we only had 5 minutes of practice. So, getting them out there, um, and actually doing something with just a couple, just a few instructions, and then tweak it. And this is where you also have to try to surround yourself with additional coaches. And this was something else that I didn't, I, I, I guess if I was going to do it again, I would try to recruit other people, more people. I shouldn't say other, but more coaches to help with it. So I could take somebody aside while the drill was going on and say, "Hey, I see you're struggling with this," or whatever. And sometimes that would be a kick in the pants too, but to not do it in front of everybody, and just bring them over and say, "Okay, hey, we need a little bit more energy out of you," or trust my other assistants to do the same thing, where I can stay with it. But many times I found myself at practices by myself, or not all teams, not all sports, where I just said, okay, look, I'm not going to be able to deal with that particular thing today, but I'll figure out a way to work it in next time.
Mm. There was advice that I was given a long time ago when I started doing clinics. And you have like 40 kids, and there's only maybe you have 6 to 8 players that you're responsible for at once. And occasionally you get that kid who just like you can tell just doesn't want to be there, or like you said, like doesn't really care about practice. They just want to play. And they were like, stop putting so much effort into that one kid that doesn't want to be there and put your effort, put your energy into the ones that do. And a lot of times you kind of see that one kid who, refuses to be there or wants to be a nuisance, whatever. They start kind of like rising to the level of the others because they're like, well, I want attention, right? But did you
Yeah.
ever find yourself stuck? Because I know there were times where I felt stuck and I put all of my effort into this one kid and I'm like, wait, there's a bunch of other kids that can get so much more out of this if I just pour what I can pour into them and not really worry as much about the kid who doesn't want to be there because they'll either eventually pick it up or, not be on the floor or on the roster when the day comes. Did you ever struggle with that at
Yeah.
all?
Yeah. I don't remember spending a lot of time with the kids that didn't want to be there. I mean, I guess I'm more of, we're going to march on and you're either going to, pick up the pace or you're going to get left behind.
Mm,
I was, I, I mean, I understand the principles behind the policies we had. What was it, a decade ago? No child left behind. And I didn't see the merit when it came to sports because it's not that complicated. We're not talking about doing advanced calculus or even reading at a 10th grade level when you're only in fifth grade. We're just talking about being out there and you either want to do it and sometimes that'll be for maybe not necessarily the right reasons. You're doing it, at an early age, you might be doing it only because you had an older brother or sister that was doing it, or you might only be doing it because it would make your parents happy to start it. Um, but and now I didn't do anything to put, yeah, I don't know how that's going to be interpreted. I wouldn't ignore them. I wouldn't do that kind of thing. I wouldn't stick them in right field in that proverbial right field and ignore them. But I would set that bar in my head where I wanted them all to be and let them all reach for it.
mm,
Um, I'm not a big fan of the what's the other saying? The squeaky wheel gets the grease, or um, you know, you just have to, you wanted to accomplish so much, and there was in a practice, and you really didn't let, again, barring catastrophe or an injury or something like that, or some severe meltdown, which I don't really remember ever having from someone. You just said, look, we're going to keep on marching on. And if I want this train to be, 50 miles down the track by this practice, I wanted to get it pretty close to 50 miles down the track and not allow for a lot of, um, distraction.
hmm What do you think of this quote that I just heard from, she was a track runner in the Olympics, not this past one, but I think the one before, that your training, you have to think of it in like the rule of thirds. A third of the time, it's going to go insanely well. It's going to go amazing. Third of the time, it's going to be average. It's going to be fine. You're showing up, you're putting in the work. And then a third of the time, it's going to be awful. If you can reflect back on, training and practices, is that kind of the tiers that you would describe um, how training went or practices
Yeah.
went?
Um, yeah, without a doubt, I would never go in there and expecting, the entire practice to run, you know, perfectly. I mean, again, that goes back to, games aren't perfect, practices aren't uh, perfect. Practices can be designed in a way that every individual coach feels like they're going to maximize that period of time with the space that they're in. Like if we're in a basement with giant poles in between our, where we're going to try to hit ground balls and throw across, and it's basically a warehouse basement with a bunch of pillars in there. You can say, okay, well, I'm not going to treat this like I'm playing, in Oklahoma City, but what can we get out of it? All right, well, I can hit around these poles and let them throw across that at that angle. So nothing's going to be perfect. Now, the third thing, I don't know if I've ever heard it that way, but yeah, I mean, you can't. I would not want to. I wouldn't get discouraged if I'm like, look, we're gonna, do these again. My example, my analogy, we're gonna get 50 miles down the track. Um, things would go wrong. Does that mean that one third of that time is going to keep me from getting close to that goal? No, but you have to react to whatever you're dealing with. If it's a concept that totally was missing the mark, let's talk about, not specifics, but just hitting in general, where you were going to try to get some more, drive out of the lower body, and you brought in a couple drills that were going to, focus on that, and they were totally going off, off the rail, sticking with my train and tracks. Then yeah, you're gonna say, okay, we're gonna scrap that, or you're gonna keep trying to plow through it. But if everybody's not getting it, that's a pretty good sign that, this wasn't the day, or this wasn't the technique or the drill, or this wasn't the communication, this wasn't the instruction. And then you learn from it. So, every day I would want to, learn from the things that went well to, influence my style and my way of communicating with that particular group of young girls.
Mm. So I love that you brought up practice because I was going to ask you about it and how seriously you take it. Because when I had Caitlin Lowe on the podcast, she said one of her favorite things that she had learned from her mentor, Mike Andrea, who we've watched many YouTube videos of with hitting and especially defense from him.
Hmm.
Um, we love him and respect him, and I hope to get him on the podcast one day. But one of the tools that she said she learned the most from was practice planning. And she goes, I love practice. She said the same thing that you did. Like, you probably listened to the interview that I had with her, but she said, I love games. I love winning. That's great. But she's like, I love practice the most. And, you know, because you were putting practice plans together, especially for that travel ball level, um, I know I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you the question of like, specifically, is it rep space mostly for, think about when you were coaching Christina in travel for like a very high elite team. Every kid's going to some sort of high level softball program after this. When you were coaching that, what were you prioritizing then?
Uh, I, it wasn't reps. It wasn't, only because
Is
we
that
didn't have.
because everybody's putting in their reps on their own at that point at home?
Well, that's what I was going to say. I mean,
Yeah,
well, whether they were or whether they weren't, that was the expectation,
right.
that that if let's say we would struggle rolling over top of the changeup, we couldn't hold on. We needed to work on that particular thing. I would like to just give them, the philosophy, or the points of emphasis, and then demonstrate it, to then let them get a couple, not a couple reps in, and maybe in different situations, maybe live arm, maybe soft toss, some drills you can do. You can even do with side toss for a changeup. Learn those drills and say, okay, now take this one home with you.
Mm,
And so my emphasis, and again, it depends on what we're talking about. If we're talking about rec, if we're talking about school, if we're talking about younger travel versus, older elite travel, there would have been differences. There are differences. Uh, I would like to have a little bit of regular routine, so they aren't going to come in and I'm going to totally change everything that we did. Like, we aren't going to throw and we aren't going to do a warm up, or we're not going to hit today. There's a part of the practice. I can't say it with 50% because I honestly I don't remember exactly ever thinking about how much of practice would be routine, and then how much would be uh, new things to kind of like, you know, raise the bar. And then there was also the game situations, right?
hmm
Going over signals is something that you have to spend time on. And again, if you're only going to see your team once a week for maybe even had a longer practice, not just 2 hours. You still have to, get that in, and it's going to take up time. So you're trying to help them with their IQ. You're trying to help them with their own personal growth and discipline, and you're also trying to run them through various situations where they will you know not just intuitively know, right? Here's a first and third bunt situation with a fast kid on first base where they may fake the bunt and steal to try to get you guys all to try to get the defense all flustered and make a mistake, or sometimes even worse than make a mistake, standing up and it's like, what just happened? They didn't even know what was happening in that situation. um so there's all those aspects, and I think I would try to touch on all of them, but to what I was saying about the structure, I wanted there to be some familiarity. So you're not going to, walk out of the car and just, get geared up and all of a sudden I'm going to have them all in the outfield sliding head first, to work on their pop-up slides, or feet first and working on pop-up slides.
Mm,
So a little bit of routine, definitely building, and then, the chemistry and situational stuff.
yeah. And I think we had a lot of fun too, when we practiced. Like there were always ways where we were engaged and there'd be fun little challenges. We were never bored, I think, when I played under you. And again, it's different when you're 18 about to go play in college, but also in seventh grade playing basketball, like there were always fun things that we did too. Did you try to prioritize fun or did it just happen because you put together, something cool that you're like, oh, let's try this. See how it
Mm,
goes.
well, it definitely wasn't a priority, uh, but but you know, I I yes, you're right. There were things that we would bring in at the end of a practice, or even a drill, a ball handling drill, or actually a running drill to try to you know get them focused, but to have some fun and some healthy competition. Running the bases was always a fun competition drill when you did a chase.
Hmm.
One runner would chase another runner, with a head start, and of course the coaches were the ones that would say go, and they could say, okay, well, I know this kid's fast and this kid's slow, so I'm going to make the fast kid work harder, or
Hmm.
I'm going to give the slower kid, the opportunity to make a play. So it's not just a give, a foregone conclusion that who what the outcome is going to be. Yeah, I planned those a little bit, but those were always the ones that kind of got scratched if I felt we needed to work on something else. So the one other thing about fun is, uh, I think the harder you work, the better you get, and the result of doing something well, um, is a whole lot of fun that I wanted to try to help the girls realize.
Hmm. You did. You did. I can speak from experience. Uh, Last thing about coaching, who are some of your favorite coaches that
Oh, that's
you,
easy.
I know,
Yeah, that's easy.
I
So
know.
let's go with yesterday or 2 days ago when UConn won the girls basketball tournament. Gino Ariama, and the only reason I'll bring him up first, it was because of the question that you had just asked, where he was talking about his practices, and this clip went. It was in my feed. I don't know if it was viral, but I was seeing it all day long, after he had said it. And I don't think he actually said it. He could have said it years ago. I have no idea actually when he said it, but it went viral right around the time of their Final Four, where he was like, don't practice here, or if you think you're going to practice here and play here, then you're nuts, right? The idea is to practice here. So in the pressure games, when you may not be performing here because of a number of reasons, uh, nerves, excitement, the competition is going to prevent you from being here, and you can play at this level, and let that be enough. But if you're going to practice at something less than your best, you're never going to be able to just magically just play better, when it comes to the game. So Gino Auriemma, you know, it's the demeanor of these coaches that I think is a common theme for me. Uh, uh, Tom Landry's stoicism when in the '70s when he was the Dallas Cowboys coach. Uh, Mike Andrea was you mentioned him. He was the first when you first got involved and I got involved because of that. He was the coach I just liked seeing. Um, you know, people that your listeners won't know were a couple coaches that I played with in summer baseball when I was in American Legion in Pennsylvania. Uh, they were great. They were funny. They were serious. They were knowledgeable. Uh, they helped form my love of the game and my love of the sports in general. Um, I don't remember if we said this last time or if this topic came up, but there was one guy. He had a nickname. His nickname was Truck, and you know, being 40 years out of high school, me and five or six friends on text or when we get to see each other, we're still quoting him. He was just a funny. He was a funny guy. He had a number of vices, but when it came to baseball, he was the guy we went to for knowledge. He was the guy that would taught. I'll be honest. He taught us and me specifically how to be able to laugh at yourself because he would rib you, and that was like that's become something that coaches seem to be want to shy away from now.
Yeah.
Uh, and there could be a difference, the female athlete versus the male athlete. So I recognize that. But I used to playfully joke, sometimes, rib, make fun of in a not just to befriend players, but to let them know it's okay to laugh at yourself. And it wouldn't be this, well, are you laughing at me or are you laughing with me? And I was trying to get them to say, no, that was really funny. And thank you for giving me that entertainment and the rest of it that entertainment. But it's okay that you may have made a mistake and it was silly, or
Yeah.
you may have said something weird that may get you a nickname. And and uh, and I do. I don't know the psychology of it, but I do know there is a difference between guys and girls with that. But this coach, he was always giving it to us, and he was quick and he was smart, and hopefully some of that rubbed up on me. But he his name was Truck. My other coach was Terry Stout in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and he's still doing it to a certain degree, and he's well into his 80s.
Wow.
Um, uh, yeah, let me think. Um, Basketball. Well, don't tell Christina, but I was a Coach Krzyzewski fan for a long
I was
time.
waiting for you to say Coach K this whole
Yeah, and
time.
then she said she was never gonna get me tickets to any Carolina games. So I stopped telling her that I was a Krzyzewski
But
fan.
who's
And then
not a
Bob
Coach
Knight.
K fan? Oh yeah,
What's
but
that?
I said, but who's not a Coach K fan? Like, I
Oh,
mean,
everybody that hates Duke, which is half of everybody.
but if you listen to his interviews, if you listen to how he practiced, like, yes, a lot of it I saw in you, I will say, as my basketball coach, but from a coaching perspective, maybe now that she is a coach in college, she can respect that answer. Who knows?
No, she won't.
Who knows?
No, she won't. She won't.
All right.
Um, but along like same lines, I was also a huge Knight fan. So before I came out to Indiana, I was a Bob Knight fan. And that was when I didn't even really follow the game in a way other than watching it for entertainment.
Yeah.
but yet there was something about him, and it wasn't his demeanor was 100%, opposite of mine. And that wasn't the part that I even gravitated towards. I just liked the way his teams played,
Hmm.
and I liked how he would make adjustments. Again, this is when I really wasn't even paying attention to that kind of a thing. I just noticed it. Um, but no, and then we came out here, and then I got to watch him more, and I got to watch all these high school coaches that used to dress like him when I came to Indiana. They're all wearing white shirts and V-neck sweaters. I mean, not red if their school colors weren't red, but when I came to basketball games back then, I swear 2 out of every 3 coaches was that wasn't like a brand new 28-year-old high school coach, but the older coaches, they all looked and dressed like Bobby Knight, and I'll even say they were uh, foolishly trying to act like him too. But
Okay, but what I like that you said about him is that you like the way his team played. Have you ever been complimented with that phrase from a fellow coach or someone that you know? Like, I like the way your team plays, coach.
yeah, yeah,
That's gotta feel good. Not that you do it for that
it's fine.
reason,
It's
not that
fine.
you do it for that reason,
Right. No, I
but it's a good goal to have.
well, I'll be honest, I could care less what other coaches or other people would
I
say.
know.
Now, if somebody said, "Look, I, I've seen how you played and I like how you coach. I'm interested in, bringing my daughter over and let seeing if she could be a good fit." That's a totally different thing. But if it was
Right.
just somebody to say, we like, that, I'm like, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
I wasn't in it for that.
Well, I don't know if I told you this, but when I played against Arizona, it was one of my better games. And Mike Andrea gave me an extra long handshake and made sure I knew that he respected how I played the game. That was one of the coolest moments ever for
Yeah,
me.
no, no, for a coach to give it to a player, absolutely. And that would have made me feel good on a number of levels. But yes, yes, that's the same. But for somebody to come to me and do it, totally different. Um, but yeah, and that's where I don't do it full time, so I can't. I don't think I can really even put it to words what you see in a player that was different than all the other players on the team. And maybe it's because you knew she came in with the highest batting average, or she had the most, steals, or had the fewest errors. Yeah, you see the stats, and maybe that might get you watching, a few particular players more than others. But it's all those intangibles that you look at it and say, hey, I could have coached that kid, or that kid would could have been a fit on my team. Not from a regret standpoint, but I would do that for certain players.
Hmm.
In fact,
It means a lot to the player, I will say.
this just happened. Was it during basketball season?
When you were reffing?
Yeah, yeah. It happened this year that there was a kid. Oh, I remember. I won't give any specifics, but she was young. She was a fifth grader playing on the seventh and eighth grade team in a small pool because they didn't have enough players. And 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 of course her parents were heavily involved with the athletics at that school, and she was playing, and I told her I told her, well, I didn't really tell her to try to make her feel good about it, but I was encouraging her because she was getting frustrated because teams would then try. She was very good, and she was probably their best player even in fifth grade.
Mm.
Not that they were super strong, but again, just imagine a fifth grader doing that much better than a seventh and eighth grade team. The seventh and eighth grade team was hurting. However, she made them better. And, I made a comment to her coach, who was also her dad, um, that she reminded me of you and Sarah playing. Because, well, one, she was, built like you guys were. She was, uh,
Which was small and scrawny.
Yeah, but also incredibly athletic and very quick.
I just wanted to
Um,
preface it because people only see me as like 6 foot now.
right.
Wasn't always this way.
Yeah. But she made great decisions. She did all that, and I told her about that, or I told her dad about that, and I guess it was, I didn't do it for any other reason other than I think he was getting frustrated that she was getting frustrated with her play. And I'm like, look, she's just fine where she's at. Just let her, like, keep encouraging her, and let her go. So,
That's fun.
but I don't usually do that. In fact, I don't do that at all when I officiate. But that was one that I thought was too. It was put there for me to make a comment about.
Yeah. Well, it's great perspective because he's obviously, you've been in his shoes before.